Hey, have you ever heard the term, you never want to be the smartest person in the room? Well, today's episode is going to prove that. I guarantee it, because I am definitely not the smartest person in this room. Hello, everybody in the U.S. and around the world. It's time for Baseball Outside the Box, the show which interviews baseball's best coaching minds who love the challenge, the status quo. Today we bring you the 1-2 punch, some of the best outside the box thinkers, no doubt some of the best in the world in teaching, research, development, you name it. They are outstanding. We're not going to waste any time. Let's welcome my good friend Ron Wolforth, and for the first time on Baseball Outside the Box, Randy Sullivan of the Florida Baseball Ranch, and of course Ron of the Texas Baseball Ranch. Everybody knows these guys. They don't need an intro. Let's just say right away, guys, thanks for being on the show, man. We appreciate it.
It's great.
My pleasure.
Ron and Randy, listen, we're going to get rolling right away. So first of all, it's an honor. We're going to have a lot of questions. We already got people on Facebook Live. Go ahead and mark any questions in the comments section. I've got some questions that were texted to us already. Let's start with Randy, since he gets to go first, Ron, because he's never been on a show before. So
the crowd goes wild.
All right.
Yes.
I'll try to bunt for a hit and see if I can get on so Ron can bring me in here.
Maybe one thing you could do for me, guys, is kind of make me a little bit more equal. So, try to keep me maybe not the smartest guy, but somewhere close. That would help. All right, listen, Randy, with today's times, this comes up all the time. Everybody knows it. I'm sure you guys have gotten this question probably 50 times already. In these trying times as a leader, in leadership, everybody talks about leaders in the game. What are you doing to help your players out, to get them prepared, mentally, physically, get them ready to go back into the season? Because this could break at any time, at any level, youth level, travel, high school. What some advice for our coaches out there to work with their players?
Sure. Ron and I have talked about this a lot. As you know, we're really good friends and we talk almost every day, right, Ron? But when this thing hit, both our sons had the same reaction. They were like, we don't know what to do. His son has been playing since he was 0, as has mine. And my son reached out to me and said, I don't know what to do. And I said, well, we'll do what we always do. We'll work while we wait. And we've sort of latched onto that mantra that there's just no way to know what's going to happen. And so we've always, at the ranch, we've always emphasized the need to just control what you can control and not let the things that are out of your control impact you. And this is something that no one can control. And, it's something obviously that no one in our country's ever faced anything like this. We've never had baseball players who started and then stopped and then started again. And so we just said, look, here's what we're going to do. If we were playing right now, the season would be going on. Let's train as if we were playing a season right now. And you can always find opportunities in struggles. And one of the opportunities here, it's the first time in the history of the game that you could finish a season, work all off season to try to improve on the areas that you needed to improve upon, test them out in live fire, and then stop and reset and get a chance to, it's almost like you got the answers to the test back. You took the test and the teacher let you correct the wrong answers. And it's a huge opportunity for our guys to just lock it down and work while they wait and fix all those things.
And Ron, there's really not one thing that you can do. There's got to be several things you got to do. Build a routine, stay within a routine, some advice in that area.
Well, Randy is exactly right, as he often is, that the real, how you view the problem mostly is the problem. And a lot of people are now kind of wringing their hands and they're worried about this. And Randy and I think I told you off camera, we've had multiple conversations with major league organizations that say, what can we do? And Randy and his staff at the Florida Baseball Ranch and my staff at Texas, we've always had this mindset of we are going to go forward no matter what is going on around us. We're going to choose how we look at things. And the first thing we look at it is, look at it as an incredible opportunity to improve on some of the things you otherwise would not have had an opportunity to do, right? So whether that is improve a mechanical inefficiency, to improve your mobility or stability, to actually work on a secondary pitch, or really work on your designing a different sequences, or whether that's as much as even working on your pickoff play, or working on something like that, or actually what I'm really recommending to all of our minor league guys is to watch a lot of major league footage, and take, for example, of Justin Verlander, and watch him for a couple innings and watch how he attacks hitters, or find a pitcher that is similar to you on the data, that really your signature is very close, and how does he attack major league hitters, and then how would you do that? And so it gives you an incredible opportunity to work while you wait. And I love that term, and we're certainly doing it here.
And we've got a big advantage, guys. Randy, technology nowadays is incredible. I mean, we've got so much at our hands right now. What's a good way to use it properly, the technology, to, again, as your home or in your backyard?
Well, first of all, if you have a guide, a mentor, someone you've turned to for advice and help over the years, it's so amazing that we can connect with people electronically like we're doing right now. And it is as close to the real thing as you can get. I mean, obviously it's not in 3 dimensions, and the teacher's not there with you, but if you can connect with people who you trust and share video and work together in that regard, that's great. And then, the technology, if you're referring to, the measurement devices like Rapsodo or TrackMan or things like that, huge opportunity to just get feedback. But we've talked about this a lot, and a lot of coaches are sort of nervous about using technology and data. And I tell them, look, you've been teaching movement your whole life. Since you were a coach, you taught people how to move. And what you have to understand is that the data doesn't produce the movement. It's the movement of the athlete that produces the data. And if you can look at it in that regard and use the information that you're getting from these devices as feedback to say, okay, this is what we've always thought we saw.
Mm-hmm.
And now it just validates it for us. Okay.
Yeah.
But I don't know of very many people who can put on a high-speed Edgertronics camera and a Rapsodo or a TrackMan and say, okay, I want you to change the axis of your curveball, and can cognitively think their way through that, because it happens so fast at the last second. I think you have to figure out, okay, what is it about the way we're moving that is making us have to release the ball in a way that creates a gyro spin or cuts the ball around, and I'm not getting as much efficiency as I can. And you have to go back and look at, all right. And essentially it comes back to the same things we've always known. If you're stable in your movement, you can get behind the ball, you can backspin it, you can carry, which means you can spin your breaking ball better. And it is the efficiency of the movement, not the lack of movement, but the economy, the efficiency, getting the most out of each move that you make, that creates the data that we collect. And we have a lot of technology. If you walk out into our gym, we have hundreds of thousands of dollars of technology out there, and it's great as a tool. But one thing that I emphasize to our staff is that, look, if we can't use it to teach, it's worthless to me. It's worthless. If I can't use it to teach a player how, because I'm a teacher, it's what Ron and I do, we teach. And if we can't use information like the technology to teach a better way to move or a better way to attack a hitter, then it's irrelevant. So we need to make sure that we sift through this information that we're getting and find out what's usable and what can we use as a training tool to teach our players how to play the game better. Love
it. Ron, if you want to jump in, go ahead.
Well, he's exactly right. And in this way specifically, data has always been around us and been building for years and years and years. I just read a book not too long ago about World War II, and one of the reasons that the Allied powers beat the Germans, one of the reasons, and especially the Japanese, is what our data collection, our understanding of what was going on was just better than theirs were. In essence, that we actually started to find data that really mattered. There's data points everywhere all the time, and Rapsodo and TrackMan bring some of those. Some of it is what Randy said is exactly profound. Some of that data doesn't matter at all. Some matters profoundly. Some may not matter now, may matter later. And you've got to sift through that and find out which ones are really the important ones at this specific juncture for each individual. So what Randy and I do that is really, I think, special in baseball is this. We try to hyper-personalize everything because every individual is unique. Certainly, Pete, you're unique. I've known you for a long time.
Very unique.
Bev would really agree with me on that.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing either.
But that's my joke to all the guys come in. If you doubt my words, just ask your mother. She'll vouch me on that. And so here we are. The danger, Pete, is especially in COVID-19, we try to take a one-size-fits-all problem and we try to solve everybody. Or as Randy and I were texting back the other night, and he said something, once again, just really incredibly insightful. He said, we're trying to answer general questions with specific answers. And it's not good, right? And so that's what you try to do, and it really takes if all the coaches and parents looking out there, it really, I think it takes humility and caution more than it does anything. It's like you got to know when to say something, and most of the time when you're working with a kid, sometimes it's better to say nothing than to say something that makes you feel good or they may interpret and they go the wrong way, and that's really hard for people because coaches want to help. We desperately want to help. And so we give these verbal cues, and it can really create corruption. It can create catastrophic interpretation of things. And we've got to be really careful of that.
Absolutely. Well said. And, and with the coronavirus, it's interesting because, data is being used with the coronavirus. Hopefully they're asking a lot of questions, to business people, to other people. Hopefully, it's a group effort. Something I want to get into, I think is interesting because both of you seem to be, and before I get into it, I want to remind everybody, the International Sports Group travels around the world educating coaches. I want to thank both Ron and Randy personally for always going places for us and educating coaches. I mean, they're really special. It's not about the money because there is no money in that. They do it because they love it. And I know Ron also is a sponsor of the ISG. Thanks again in front of everybody in the U.S. and around the world. Both of you guys are at the forefront. There's no doubt about it. You're in the forefront of teaching, educating, research, development. I want to get into how does Randy and Ron get in the forefront? What do you do to get better where you're always a step ahead of everybody else? You just mentioned World War II, the book you read, but I'm sure there's a lot more. So I'd love to hear. Randy, why don't you give that a start?
Well, in what was it, 2015, Ron, that you set me up in the front row to listen to Franz Bosch speak and just watched as I marveled. Ron had met Franz Bosch in Belgium, right? And so he brought him over to speak, and they sat me in the front row, and he and Jill knew exactly the impact it would have. And I couldn't write notes fast enough. And it sort of revolutionized my thought process and sent me on this deep dive into an independent study of the science of motor learning and skill acquisition. I thought I was a coach, teacher. I thought I knew motor learning. I was a physical therapist. It turns out that I didn't know nearly as much as I thought I did, and there was a lot more to learn. And so I've kind of gotten lost in that independent study, just trying to find ways to improve. Ron has been really inspirational to me in guiding me toward leadership books, toward sort of paradigm shifting books, and then in addition to that, I've kind of dug deep into a lot of scientific knowledge on how do people learn movement skills? What's the best way to teach a person to move? And for me, that's how I occupy most of my time. I'm kind of notorious for never sleeping because I get sort of down these research holes and can't go to sleep until I figure something out, or at least get closer. And so, and honestly, Ron was a big part of that too. Even back when I first started in 2008, I believe it was, he was the first guy to really, I think the first book you told me to read was Outliers, I think, Ron, and then Talent Code and other things like that. And so he's, we kind of share things with each other and guide each other toward things that we think make a difference. And it's been really great to have that relationship, to have that friend and that there's only so many people in your life that you count as a true friend, and Ron is one of those for me. And we're able to exchange ideas in a non-threatening way and call each other wrong and argue and debate and discuss and challenge. And it's been really a growth experience for both of us. And I think that if you traced our roots back somewhere along the way, we were from the same cloths. I don't know how that works, but our paths have followed very similar
Let
trajectories.
me tell you,
Yeah.
Pete.
And Ron, just to mention, I want to mention when I met Ron Wolforth was, I want to say 20 years ago at the Iowa Coaches Convention. You were speaking, and I bring that up because, you were in those days, you were studying the Russians, backward chaining, I believe.
Yep.
You were delving back then into things that the Russians were doing and other people. So go ahead, Ron. Love to hear your perspective also.
Yeah, we're still dealing with Nikolai Bernstein. He's still front and center of what we do. When I first met Randy, Randy was sitting in probably the middle of the row. He brought his son in, and it was a 4th of July weekend, wasn't it, Randy? It was very hot in a barn. It was probably 105 degrees in there, and he had to sit there and listen to me lecture, and it's 105 degrees with 85% humidity. I don't know how he stayed awake. But I could tell he was, when I was talking, and I was talking about energy systems and about why we don't long distance run and all that. And I could see Randy kind of like, it was like he was animated and he was irritated and I didn't know what was up with him, right? There was something going on. And so later in that day, he comes up to me and he said, "I really appreciate what you just said. And what really is frustrating to me is I knew everything you said. I already knew it, but I didn't apply it." And that was a spark for us. And he just went, "Dang, I knew that." And you said it. Why don't you say it, Randy? I don't know exactly how you said it, but you said, "I knew this," and I should. And so that started him actually applying his physical therapy understanding of anatomy, physiology, and that was started us down this road.
Yeah, and folks, check them out, both of them on Twitter, Texas Baseball Ranch and Florida Baseball Ranch. Notice Randy talked a lot about anatomy, and if you're going to be a coach, understanding the anatomy, that helps a lot. It's not the only thing, but it's one of the things. This is great stuff. Listen, most shows, and I'm trying to figure out some things that maybe we haven't discussed in the past on other shows, and because a lot of them might delve into the actual pitching or development aspect, and we're going to get into that a little bit. But I'd like to know, what are some of when it comes to the teaching process, what are some of the misconceptions that are out, that maybe possibly, coaches are doing wrong? Let's just face the facts. We're not all perfect. We're doing some things that are wrong. What are some of those misconceptions, Randy?
I'm gonna have Randy start with that. No, I'm gonna have Randy start with that because he and I were just talking about the other day about cueing and about how people. He has this incredible summit, the Motor Skills Acquisition Summit, in which he brings in the best people from all over the world and talks about it. He's had somebody from Australia, he's had from the Netherlands, and they actually talk about that, and it's fascinating. Randy and I are fascinated on how people learn. And if you're ever at the Florida Baseball Ranch or the Texas Baseball Ranch and you watch us work, it is definitely different than the standard baseball fare. It's just different, and a lot of people would kind of be maybe stunned that there isn't a lot of verbal demands and overreach. So Randy, you want to kind of talk to that?
Sure. Well, one thing I've learned in the study of motor learning science is that the body isn't interested very much in what the coach has to say. Franz Bosch said that the first day I heard him talk, and it shows a little interest in what the coach has to say. The body wants to survive and thrive. It wants to keep itself safe, and it wants to accomplish important goals. And what it's interested in doing is resisting shear forces or jerky motions that put connective tissue at risk. It hates extremes of motion. It doesn't like to be in extreme positions where the anatomy isn't stable, isn't in the sound place. And the body is also not interested in burning a lot of calories thinking about how it wants to perform a task. It wants general information that it can use across the board in several different situations so it can remain adaptable and survive and thrive. And very little of that has to do with what the coach has to say. There are occasions where verbal cues can be helpful. Ron and I talked about this, and I actually learned this at the SFMA course from Greg Rose, who does that on-base shoot thing. And said a really good way to use a cue is if a player performs something well, and you ask him, okay, where did you feel the most energy in that movement? Where did you feel like the energy started? And then if he can answer that question and tell you, I felt like I started that movement with my back hip right here, then he has a cue that you can say, okay, I want you to feel the energy in your back hip. But that was his cue. We didn't make it up, because words get in the way, right? When I say you're flying open, what does it mean? Okay. Does it mean your hip? Does it mean your shoulder? Does it mean words get misinterpreted? And you have to assume that when your coaching style is laden with verbal cueing, you have to assume that you and your player are on the exact same page in understanding the language. First of all, what does that actually mean? And then you also have to assume that your player, in the amount of time it takes for him to make a throw, can take that information from his brain to his muscles and back up to his brain again, and simply can't. There's not enough time. When you do the math, it doesn't work out. So verbal cues have their place, but they're the most easily corrupted and the most easily misinterpreted. And, we've all been guilty of it. I have done it too. And it's that awkward silence that we hate. We want to fill it with words and instructions. And we have to, and it's because we want to help. It's what Ron said. Coaches are passionate about helping players. And when you don't feel like when you feel like you're not saying something, that dead time where the learning really occurs, we interrupt it with nothing, with just words that the body isn't interested in.
Well said. Ron, what do you got for us?
Well, I think if I was really to give a message to the coaches and parents, I would say this, that most practices are not actually doing what they think is doing. It's really creating an adapted athlete to a very specific stimulus. And the game is chaotic. The game is wide open. And that's the reason we have this term called a 5 o'clock hitter, or a guy that's really good in bullpen, or a guy that's really good in the drill. He's really good at a very narrow stimulus. Yeah. But in a game, the crap is flying from every direction. The bullets are going, right? And there's the fog of war and everything's in there. So what Randy and I and our staffs try to do, and we talk about this a bunch, is trying to create adaptable athletes, not adapted athletes. And an adapted athlete would be somebody that is really good at hitting a specific speed at a specific trajectory, at a specific rhythm and tempo. Unfortunately, professional baseball or college baseball or high school baseball, you'll see a guy throwing it 85 in here, and the next pitch is 76 over here, and then closing as a guy's throwing 100 over here. And so you've got to be much more resilient, robust, variable, adaptable, and that's what we're trying to build. And you can't build it by static, plastic, sterile training processes. You can't do it.
Well said. And I was just thinking about that because, Ron, obviously I've been around Ron, went to Australia, New Zealand with him, other places. But I was looking at Randy's Twitter and I saw a drill I thought was, fantastic. I looked and it had a hitter and you had 3 pitchers rotating, each one through 1 pitch each, which gave a lot of variability. Now, that looks fantastic and it makes tons of sense. When a young coach is looking at his practice, whether it be because, he's going to be running practice for different drills, different skills, how do you identify the drills that you might set up? Because, it used to be in the old days, you set it up 1, 2, 3, like a sequence. Well, that seems to be thrown out the window, the sequence part, because as Ron has said many times, everybody's an individual. This might work for you. This may not work for this person. So, it's not all the same. How do you set that up? I mean, it's mind-boggling a little bit because, like you said, it's chaotic. Randy, what do you...
Well, yeah, Ron and I talked about this just the other day. It has to be individualized. It has to be based on the player. And see, one of the mistakes I made as a young coach was I wanted everything to be regimented and I wanted us to be on time and on schedule. I wanted to run a really clean, smooth practice. And I had athletes that were really good at doing whatever I asked them to do. And then I remember we had guys that had perfect form when they fielded the ground ball and they stood up to throw. And we played a little team from Miami that could throw the ball on the run, and they were doing all kinds of my kids weren't athletic enough to do that. And I realized it was because of the rigid structure that I had. And so the way you have to do that, variability is important. You need to add variability, but you also don't want to overwhelm your athlete, right? And the variability has to be in context. It has to be variability that moves you toward the goal that you're going to trying to achieve in a game. Okay. And so in motor learning science, the general accepted measure is that if you're in the learning zone, you're succeeding about 60 to 70% of the time. So let's say we have a hitter and we're gonna just challenge him with a lot of chaos. That's our idea. So he becomes an adaptable athlete. Well, if you're throwing pitches from every different angle, a new pitcher every time, and he's getting overwhelmed and he's failing 10 out of 10 times, he's not learning. He's not learning. So if he's squaring up in a round of 10 swings, if he squares up 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10, you need to make it more chaotic, more variable, make it tougher on him. If he's squaring up 3 out of 10, he's overwhelmed. You need to back that guy down and make that environment a little more predictable. And sort of, so we base the amount of chaos that we, first of all, you don't add chaos to a new student, right? You don't have a brand new student running around throwing different size and weights of balls on the run because you just don't know if he's gotten the build up, the ramp up to tolerate that work. You just don't know if his system is able to tolerate that kind of perturbation yet. You have to be around him for a few weeks before you start it. You don't start with chaos. You start with less chaos and you expand it gradually as you feel more comfortable about his physiology and as you feel more comfortable about him not being overwhelmed. And then you just look at how much he's succeeding. And if it's around 70 to 80%, now we add more chaos. And then he'll fail a little bit more. And then when he builds it back up, we'll kind of add it gradually. Just like we do everything, you add it gradually, incrementally over time.
That's brilliant. To add some context to what Randy's talking about is you kind of look at on a scale of there is a variability where you actually start to add just a little bit of variation to the theme. Once they have the theme down, you can start to add variability. Then when you get to chaos, that's random. So there's a sliding continuum there. And some days you may be a little bit more on the random side. Sometimes you be way toward just the strict variant side. And so let me give you an example. If you're just learning to hit a curveball, you don't set up Randy Johnson's slider and set it up on the machine and go, here it is, kid. If you're going to hit in the big leagues, there you go. It's like, and so you've got to build on that like any other skill. And your thing is understanding varietal training, and then you move into random training, and then purely it's chaotic, and that's important to do to understand that you have all that in your toolbox.
So here's an example, like if you're talking about weighted ball training, right? And what Ron designed the chaos training where you have all the different slopes and the different size and weights of balls. But if we have an athlete who just started training with us, he doesn't start that for about 3 or 4 weeks, okay? And then we might start him on a 6 ounce, a 4 ounce, and a 5 ounce, and just nudge him into chaos and say, how does his body like it? If his body goes crazy and he's like, oh man, I'm hurt, or my arm's barking at me, it's not ready to tolerate that kind of chaos yet. And so you always have to remember that when you add variability, it's like adding weight to the bar, okay? So before we go to random chaos, we're running and jumping off of different slopes and throwing different size and weights, everything, we add a little bit of variability, and then you kind of push the guy and you back away and watch and go, all right, let's see if his body likes to be pushed. And then it's the same thing when we're talking about trying to add velocity. You don't just go, hair on fire, throw the ball hard as you can. You let him throw 5 or 6 balls as hard as you can the first day, or not the first day. After about 3 or 4 weeks, your push day comes. You let him throw 5 or 6 balls as hard as you can, and you shut him down, and you come to him the next day and go, how's it feel? Did your body hate that, or is it okay? And otherwise, we run into danger zones where we just add too much stress, aka chaos, to the system, and it's not tough enough or robust enough to resist that kind of aggravation. So,
and the other thing I really like about you guys, I think this will also help coaches a lot, is you take complex systems and you make them sound very simple for the average coach. I think that's important because it can get pretty complicated. Now, I'm going to take some questions off of Facebook because it's blowing up right now. Chris Dasse, a good friend of ours from Belgium, asks, what about practicing with a group of pitchers with different abilities, or even players with different abilities? This is something common around the world. I'm sure in the U.S. also, you're going to have different levels of players. How do you handle that, especially like if they're playing catch or if they got bullpens or any situation? Who wants to take that?
You got. You got that one, Ronnie. That's your assess and categorize, right?
Right, exactly. So we do this, both of us do this on a daily basis. So if you would come to our summer program, you'll see a group working inside of a group, meaning that there's a category, and some guys are working on a mechanical inefficiency. Some guys are working on adjustability with their command. And so really what you want to do when we talk about hyper personalization, I think it scares a lot of people, and it shouldn't. What it is what do you need most right now that's in front of you, and you actually work on that. It's actually not only it's prioritizing what you need. And so the magic or the art of this is Randy and I and our staffs being able to articulate to the player, what is it today you're going to be working with inside of this series, right? So let me give you a classic case and example, and then I'll turn it over to Randy to give another example. Garrett right now is a switch hitting catcher. I'm going to go outside of pitching for a second for the people that are not pitchers. Garrett is working on his receiving right now, and he has a Keyhole Glove, and Randy knows what a Keyhole Glove is. But what it is, it's a catcher's mitt with a kind of a net in there, and it only works if you catch the ball into the net. So you have to be very specific, very precise with your catching ability, right? And it is designed by Eddie Rodriguez, who is the catching coordinator for the Marlins, a brilliant catching mind, by the way. And so what Garrett has mastered this tool. And so what we have done is we now put on a strobe glasses for him. And what he'll do is he'll go 5-5 with the strobe glasses on, and at a really easy level on the strobe. And then you take the glasses off, and if he exactly what Randy said, if he's succeeding a high percentage of time, then we crank up the difficulty, and then we all the way, like yesterday, he went all the way to it's much tougher, and you could see him start to fail, and then we pulled back a little bit. You don't start a 12-year-old kid that's just catching with the strobe glasses, right? Mm-hmm. That's exactly what we're talking about. Is you don't now race to that. That looks interesting. And I see that, Randy and I see that specifically. I'm going to say this. I see people wanting velo, and they go online and they buy the weighted balls, and they get the velo program for free. That's dangerous, not because weighted balls are dangerous, and not even because the program is dangerous. It's because the weighted ball and the program and the mix for that individual may not be good, just like a penicillin shot may be okay for me, but for Pete, you may be allergic to penicillin. So it's not penicillin that's bad; it's the mix. It's the individualization of that. And so, Randy, you want to talk about that with some of our throwing stuff as well?
Yeah, and I think one important thing is that as a team, as an organization, as a company, you need to have a process that is repeatable. Okay. Your assessment needs to be something that's repeatable, that you need to, and your staff needs to speak the same language as you. Okay. Everybody has to be saying the same words and identifying the same things. And so what we've done here at Florida Baseball Ranch, and what Ron has done really well at Texas Baseball Ranch, is when you come in, everybody goes through the same grinder. Major leaguer, little leaguer, same assessment. The results are completely different. And based on those results, now that involves a multidisciplinary assessment. It's a physical assessment. It's a video of their biomechanical movement patterns. It's their recovery assessment, their pain audit, all the layers of assessment that we do. Everybody gets the same thing, but the results are never the same. And then we take the results, and that allows them to become placed in the categories. Okay, now we can begin to group them. And then within those groups, now we prioritize what they need to work on, and then we individualize off of that. And so it's not just like everybody comes in, everybody's doing a different thing. It's a process. Now, a lot of people don't know this about me, but after I led the Southern Conference in insignificant hits in 1986, I became a nuclear missile launch officer.
Would still keep me up at night.
Yeah, the 22-year-old me was in charge of your nation's nuclear weapons arsenal. And when you have a 22-year-old and you're asking him to launch a nuclear weapon that might end the world, we want him to be able to do that flawlessly. And so you have to have a pretty rigid checklist. And we learned that nothing got accomplished in the missile business if you didn't follow the checklist to tell you exactly what you needed to do. So we kind of do that with our players. We have a checklist when they come in. These are the things we need to look at. And then based on what we find in our assessment, now we can begin to put them in groups. And it allows us to repeat that process. So if you're a coach of a team, what is your assessment process? What are you looking at? And then how can you take that information and group them? I know when I coached travel ball, 12 guys on a team, I had three groups of 4, and they were grouped based on their ability level. Like some really athletic kids were in one group, and then the not so athletic kids were another, and not so athletic in another. And you know, you worry about the social thing. Oh, he's in the bad group. You know what? I'm not going to deal with that. Okay, everybody's where they need to be, and you just don't even bring that up. You just put them in groups based on how well they're performing. Let the good players play catch with one another. Let the mediocre players catch, and let the other guys do it. And then try to figure out where they need individual help.
Folks, if you're wondering how I'm keeping up with these guys, I'm on my second espresso. So
let's go, baby.
Cheers, man. These guys are on a roll.
It's like an Italian with an espresso at 1:43.
Yeah, he's dangerous.
I'm glad to hear it's espresso. I saw him. I thought he was doing shots at Jack Daniels right there in front of us on the air. I was like, what's going on here?
Hey, Pete, I want to. I think what would be really interesting for the people that are listening or watching is Randy and I we have multiple clients that are the same, but two that are really more or less famous, and we tag, and we still do. We tag team. I guess I shouldn't say we tag team Chin-Ming Wang anymore. He's, I think, pretty much done. But Justin Verlander is not, and so what we did for both of them is it did the exact same thing. Chin-Ming Wang, for the people that don't know, actually won 19 games 2 times for the New York Yankees and was actually second in the Cy Young one year, and it had dropped. And 8 years later was completely out of baseball. And we helped him get back and actually throw harder than he'd ever thrown before when he was in his 20s. And he was 35 or 36, right?
He was 36. Yeah.
So what we did with Justin Verlander is exactly what we do with the 12-year-old. Is the first thing we do is we do a paint audit, and we do a BRAT, which is the baseball ranch assessment tool, and it's really a high level baseball movement screen designed by Randy, and it continues to evolve and it continues to get better. And then we do high speed video analysis, and then we do recovery audit. And I'm going to say to everybody listening, recovery audit, I think everybody's shaking their head on the other things. The recovery audit to me is almost as important as anything else, because if you don't bounce back well, you're a hidden time bomb. So let me give you an example. If I throw 12 pitches, the test is really, the hack is simple this. And Randy knows how much I hate the word to use the term hack, but I'm going to in this case. I throw 12 pitches. I get ready for my game. It's like I'm going to pitch in a game. I throw 12 full speed pitches. I sit down for 5-10 minutes like I simulate an inning. Mm-hmm. I get back up. I throw 12 more. I shut it down. I do whatever I do afterwards, and I go home. I come back the next day, and now we find out how well did you respond to that. A 0 would be you responded like you could do the whole thing again, and you think you could be the same guy. You could be Mo Rivera. Right? You could be the same guy again. Or an all the way up to 2, 4, 6, 8 to 10, 10 meaning you had to shut it down. You don't even want to lift up your arm, you shut it down. And what Randy and I and our staffs believe, that if you're a 4 or higher in that scale, you have some degree of a recovery issue. And with any sort of workload and any sort of intensity and any sort of volume or duration, you're a ticking time bomb. It's going, recovery is huge. And so we go through all these assessments, and we figured out, here's what Justin Verlander and Chin-Ming Wang need to do. And Justin Verlander now has been a client for now 3 years. And every year, I guess now 4 years, it now changes. It's the things that he need to do change from what he did in the previous. And that's the way it has to work. Your plan has to evolve with you. And this is so important. It is the essence of the Florida Baseball Ranch and Texas Baseball Ranch that your plan changes with you. your plan today may be good for you today, but as soon as it's antiquated, it's no good. It needs to evolve with you. And so this is the reason we're so against one size fits all, because number one size won't fit everybody, but even the one that fits perfectly now won't fit you in 6 weeks. And I got clothes that won't fit me like from so, I wanted to put that in there before Randy did. So I knew it was coming.
Randy, Ron talks about the recovery. Hear this, recovery being critical, and about the size fits all. When it comes to recovery, recommendations, because you got to have some type of checklist of different things you're going to do for recovery to get a young person back healthy, pitching again, throwing again. And I noticed some things on the website, on Twitter. It's not just about pitchers. We're talking about throwers also, because they need to recover. Some recommendations there.
Well, I was helping the Tampa Bay Rays with their physicals several years ago, and I was standing around in the training room waiting for them all to come and matriculate in, and they were having this conversation. They said a professional pitcher who has 32 starts in a season might have his best stuff 14, 15 times. And the rest of the time, he has to learn to win when he doesn't have his best stuff. We've all heard that, right? Got to learn, absolutely, one of those bulldogs, got to be. And I thought, well, why do we have to wake up every day and hope that we have our best stuff, right? Sometimes our arm feels like mush. Sometimes ball doesn't come out good. Sometimes my curveball isn't working. Well, why is that we have to just hope? Why can't we dig in and figure out what are these variables that contribute to this lousy recovery? Whenever we see an athlete, and Ron will agree with this, who has inconsistent performances, really good and then really bad for 3 outings and then really good. And I thought, imagine if we could figure out how to help these guys recover better. Let's look at a 5-man pitching staff. Instead of getting him, okay, I can't get him 32 good outings, but what if I get the guy up from 14 to 18? Over a 5-man staff, that's 20 times where our starting pitcher has his best stuff. And if we win a third of those, that could be the difference between first and last place. I think largely the Atlanta Braves in the 1990s were so consistent because they recovered so well, because Leo Mazzoni was the first one to have them doing stuff in between, right? Not just resting, right? Because tissue wants to move, it wants to organize itself. And so we started looking at recovery, and Ron came up with this incredible list in 2010, the 6 types of contributors to subpar performance or pain.
It was 5. And we added the 6th one. It was
5. Yeah, yeah. And it fits perfectly into recovery. It is your physical structure. If you have a guy who has tightness or problems getting to ranges of motion, when he goes to throw, he's going to stress the end of that tissue. It's going to be more difficult for him to recover. If I take my hamstrings and pound them over and over again in a stretch, I'm going to be sore tomorrow. It's going to be hard for me to walk, right? Then there's your movement pattern. If you have remember, the body hates extremes of motion. If you have large disconnections that put the body in extreme place, you might be able to get away with it once or twice or a season or two, but over time, recovering from that is going to be difficult. And the tax on that is going to eventually have its effect. And then the third thing is the ramp up. If I try to run a marathon tomorrow and I make it, by some act of God, I won't be able to run a marathon again the next day because I didn't ramp up. I didn't prepare my tissue for that. And then there's your strength and conditioning programs. If what I'm doing in my strength and conditioning program isn't helping me perform better, it's hindering me. And it could be that my strength and conditioning program is contributing or taking away from optimizing my recovery. And then there's nutrition, hydration, and sleep. And then there's the number of pitches that you throw and workload. And workload is number 6, whereas a lot of people think it's number 1. It's number 6. If you're good at the first 5, you can throw a lot and you recover really well. If you're not good at the first 5, then 10 pitches may be too much for you. And if I take you to 20, you're going to have a really hard time recovering tomorrow. And so we not only individualize that, we individualize workload. Readiness for workload is really important. And so you have to begin looking at recovery. People make this mistake. Recovery is all about what I do after. It is taking care of all the variables on that wheel that we just talked about, those 6 things first. And then you'll be able to recover better. Now, then you can use things like Mark Pro to stimulate blood flow and to pump dead tissue out. It's the essence of recovery after the game is get a bunch of good guys in. The good guys are in the blood. You got to get blood in there, okay? Because the reparative cells are in the blood. Every time you throw, you microscopically tear tissue. You got to get the blood in there to get the good guys in. You got to get the dead guys out. You get the dead guys out through the lymph system, the lymphatic system, and it's a passive system. It doesn't go get the lymphatic system is like the trash man. but it's like the laziest trash man in the world. It doesn't go get your trash. It just waits for trash to migrate by and then sends a guy to grab it. And so you got to pump some trash toward the trash man so he can take it away. And then you got to give them a mechanical signal to tell them where to stand. They organize themselves initially like a plate of spaghetti noodles that left in the sink all night. They don't know where to go. They organize themselves based on the stress that you put them under. And I think that's what the Braves in the 90s were doing. They were having those midweek throwing sessions where they were organizing tissue and aligning it to resist the stresses that they were going to have to resist in the game. And now, instead of just sitting around and rusting and waiting and trying to reorganize that plate of spaghetti noodles, the day after, they're as if you pulled them right out of the box. They're in the right order. And so get prepared, take care of all the things on the 6 types of contributors as best you can. And then when you play the game, as soon as it's over, we got to get the good guys in, and they're in the blood. That's why we don't ice. Gary Reynolds, famous for the whole non-ice thing. And then we got to get bad guys out. We use Rocket Wrap to compress pressure gradients, and we use Mark Pro to create the muscle pumping action. And you don't have to have those devices. You can just use movement if you have to. You don't have those equipment available to you. They're great tools. And then you got to give them a mechanical signal to tell them where to stand. And that's where that DuraThrow training sock has been so valuable, because it is a way to throw at full intent so that the neurologic organization doesn't change. So we keep the motor pattern without corrupting it, but we're able to reorganize the physiological tissue because we give it a low stress stimulus. And so the DuraThrow training sock is about maybe a 50% stressful throw, somewhere around there, according to our studies in the Motus sleeve. And so it allows us to get the arm moving in the way that it needs to move without adding more stress or more tissue damage. So that's how we manage it after. But really, Ron, I think you'll agree, a lot of it is your recovery is about your preparation.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
In fact, let me tell you, that was awesome. And it answers a couple questions that we had, because one of the questions was, what can young players be doing now to make sure they're prepared to throw when they go outside, when everything opens up? I think you've answered that. If you haven't, you could always still get into it. And the other thing, Ron, I want you to talk about the Duro sock, but also big question comes up a lot, and we've had a couple of these with the weighted balls. You've talked about this many times. With the weighted ball program, you said it's not just the weighted balls that's going to help you throw harder in the long run. But you also have to be prepared to use that. Does your body have to be ready for that? Otherwise, I mean, if you take an 11-year-old who's not ready to go through a program like that, is he going to get hurt?
Well, the short answer is yes. His risk goes way up. But I will say that everybody listening, that a baseball, a regulation baseball, is a weighted implement. It weighs 5 ounces, right? So we don't ever throw a non-weighted one. I was on a radio show a long time ago, a guy trying to slam me on weighted balls, and he said, and I said, well, I've actually never thrown a non-weighted one, and I think I just threw him for such a loop that there was radio silence for about 15 seconds.
Yeah. And if you go down to the Dominican, you're never throwing the same ball all the time.
No, it was stayed out.
If you grow up where Ron and I grew up, every ball I only had 2, and they had electrical tape around them, and I left them in the rain, and they all, and if you've ever played a 9 a.m. perfect game tournament, you had a weighted ball by the 3rd inning. Right?
Yep.
Because of rooster tail and the dew.
The dew on the grass. But here's the deal, right? Are you ready as anybody? Forget about baseball for a second. Randy said it, use the marathon, but if I'm going to go out and really sprint, if I was going to go out today and mark out 100 yards on my street out in front of me, and I was going, Randy's can't wait to see this. This is hypothetical.
I want in on that race. I want money on that race.
Look.
This is because what people don't know, a little inside baseball, is Randy Sullivan and Ollie Katie got in a race in Italy, and they each about got hurt and never ever got back. Their recovers were terrible for the next week. But I let's say I'm going to go out and I'm going to sprint 100 yards, and the question is, if I did that, would I get hurt? And even if I survived it, the chances are great that I would be hurt because my soft tissue has never done that for a long time. So what are the possibilities of me that was a bad idea? Number one is ramp up. Randy and I are talking about this all the time. Number one is ramp up my soft tissue. Forget anything else. Forget technique. Forget all that. if my soft tissue has never even had a chance to prepare for that stress, it's not going to go well. Then it goes to structure. How am I structurally aligned? And then it goes to technique, and then so what you're really looking for is the weighted ball isn't the problem. It is just a tool. It's neither good nor bad. My joke always is with my minor league guys, a fork, giving you a fork to eat a ribeye with is it's a wonderful tool. Give a fork to my sister when she was mad when I was younger is not a good idea. A fork is neutral. So the weighted ball is neutral. The question is, the reason why so many people get hurt with it, it's not the weighted ball per se, is they are not ready for multiple reasons, not just the weighted ball. Some of them would be just as hurt if we went out and threw a regulation baseball that hard. And so we get caught up in the weighted ball because it's different. It's colored. And so we lose it. So you really look at your preparation, your total preparation of the body, mind, everything, and to throw a baseball. And I think we miss that. And ramp up, Randy and I are actually on a process of not only helping with a much more gradual long ramp up, but him and I are actually talking about Major League Baseball needs to actually have, and minor league baseball specifically, has a ramp down process where we ramp it up and we ramp it down. Because right now, when you're done with the season, as you know, Randy, they just stop, right? And right. And so we really need to look at our body much more differently. And I think we will over the next 20 years or so. And Randy's done a really good job with connecting with major league teams and organizations. And we've had probably over half of those, Randy, either visit either one of our ranches or have been to the Ultimate Pitching Coaches Boot Camp, which you need to come to there, Peter.
Yes, I promised twice I'd be there, and twice I was scheduled to go somewhere else, and I apologize. But this year is going to be my year, I think.
Hey, Pete, Pete, on that weighted ball question, I talked to Alan Jaeger about this a lot. Not a long toss gets the same knock that it puts you at risk and gets you hurt. Okay. First of all, I don't believe that the value of a weighted ball program or a long toss is in arm strength and arm speed. I think the value is in the variability. It is a way to add variability to a highly specific task. You can really make it specific, but just a little bit variable. And I think that, we're not trying to repeat our mechanics. We're trying to adjust them on the fly. And the knock against long toss is that it adds stress to the tissue and every throw is a little different. To me, the value of long toss is that it adds stress and every throw is a little bit different. But you don't add that right away. You don't take a kid who's got all these disconnections and put him in a long toss to solve his problem. You don't want to add that stress or variability yet, right? You want to gradually add that. And the same with the weighted ball program, it is a way to add variability to a highly specific task. The heavier ball simulates when I'm behind in my timing. The lighter ball simulates when I'm ahead in my timing, and I get to practice the adjustment. Okay. Now, if you're talking about a young child who's not physiologically developed yet, I do have concerns about adding super stress to underdeveloped tissue, right? If they're just not right. And I think that if you have a kid who's not physiologically developed yet, and that's sort of an eyeball test really, is how far along in the puberty scale are they? There's a lot of other ways to add variability besides a long toss or weighted ball program. You can use running throws, you can change the drills, you can do all kinds of different things to add variability. If you're concerned about whether or not to put a guy on a weighted ball program, add variability another way first and see how his system tolerates it. If it's okay, then you can gradually progress toward that. But I think Ron will agree with me here. You don't have to have a weighted ball program to gain velocity. You can do it without. I mean, there's a lot of, in fact, I'm not sure it even helps us add velocity. What it does is makes the system more adjustable in that finite amount of time that we have to make a throw.
And I've mentioned this to Ron before. I always bring up the example, again, not being the expert in this area, but, spending time in Japan a lot. There's a society of people who are not very big. They're getting bigger now. They're doing a little bit more strength training. They're not very big, but yet if you go there, everybody throws hard. Now, comparable to the U.S., maybe not as hard, but they throw pretty hard, and they all do it through a lot of different ways. So I think this is awesome. I want to get to a question on Facebook. somebody that follows you guys, Darren Gurney out of New Jersey, Coach Gurney, high school, college coach. He said, is it important to maintain 90-degree angle when approaching foot strike? He uses, to help him, he uses a thing called tap connection ball, I believe. If you can address that, Ron.
Yeah. So the deal is, we don't know exactly where of any individual person, we don't know exactly where their ideal their limb should be, because everyone is different, right? This way, right? So what we really want to do is, as you look at, this is where cueing comes in. A lot of people try to help people by saying, really get your arm long, or extend your arm, or get your arm short, or this is where the cueing comes in. If you really study it like we have at the Ranch Consortium, you see that there's a wide variety of positions that are okay, they're safe. And what the tap connection ball does is it gives you kind of a kinesthetic feedback on a feeling for that. And really, every individual is unique in that. And so I don't really even like to use the term he needs to be 90 or he needs to be inside of 90 or whatever. But there is an obvious common thing amongst young people to get unraveled early, and the connection ball can be very helpful in that, and specifically if they have medial elbow pain or anterior shoulder pain. And actually, Randy wrote a book on it based on, in 2010, I said, start with the pain. And actually, Randy's actually written a book on that same topic. And to the coach, I would say, let's start with the pain. And if they have medial elbow or anterior shoulder problem or pain on a regular basis, I would definitely use the connection ball. I would use the connection club, and I would use the DuraThrow sock to see if I could find throws that do not have that pain, and I would start there.
Fantastic. Listen, what we're going to do, guys, because you've been more than generous, we're going to go back and forth for a couple more minutes on some questions. I'm not going to keep you long after this, but I do want everybody to go to Texas Baseball Ranch and also the Florida Baseball Ranch on Twitter, because you're going to see a lot of these drills and a lot of the things they're talking about: the connection ball, the connection club, the DuraThrow sock. And here's a question from our president of ISG, Tom O'Connell, and you know that he's got some great ones. He's going to throw you a big one here. Randy, we're going to go with you. He says, I've asked this question many times to many different pitching guys all over the years. You only have 10 practice sessions prior to the first game. How do you prepare your pitching staff for a high school season, given those parameters? Specifically, how many throws per day in the bullpen, in pens? How do you ramp up to the 30, 40 pitches and so forth? I mean, there's a lot there, but kind of give us a general idea.
You want me to go there, Ronnie?
I'm going to give it to you there, big fella.
Yeah. Okay. Who has the quote that says that if I have to chop a tree down in so many hours, I'll spend the first 2 hours sharpening the axe, right? I'm gonna assess on the first two practices. I'm gonna figure out how to put them in categories for two practices. I'm gonna spend the next two practices teaching them what I think is, helping them overcome what I think is their biggest constraint. What is the biggest thing that's going to limit them from, first of all, reduce the risk of injury? Second of all, what is going to help them move up on the ladder in the step? What's the one thing? Do they need a better breaking ball? Or do they need to recover better? Are they hurt? Are they having pain? Do they need a better fastball? I'm going to spend the next two practices working on that. Okay. And then I'm going to spend, that's 4 practices. Then I'm going to spend probably the next practice sort of hybridizing that, getting them to go toward more bullpen-like / game-like sessions. And then the last 2 practices, I'm going to put them in on the mound, throwing bullpens, throwing game-like situations to get them ready to prepare for the game. That's how I'm going to handle it. So.
All right, Ron, Todd Genke, St. Charles North High School here in Illinois asks, what's the optimal spin rate curveball slider when it comes to, and he's in high school, he's got high school guys, an optimal spin rate, and then maybe, if you address that, maybe even the differential of velocity, I think is important too.
Well, Here's the thing about spin rate. Okay. Here's the thing about spin rate. That Major League Baseball is a different animal. When we see spin rates, this always worries me when we start to look at Garrett Cole's spin rate or Clayton Kershaw's spin rate on curveball, and try to extrapolate that to a high school guy. Here's what I would say to him. Not that spin rate doesn't matter. I would say that it's most important that you get. I imagine he's doing it with Repsodo, if I'm to guess, because it's one of the cheaper ways to do that. And I would look. I would start to create his own database for his kids, and I think that the biggest thing is to compare the kid and look at it. Let me give you an example. There are some. If it was just the best spin rate wins, you would see different pitchers win the Cy Young. There's a lot of ways that Major League pitchers are very successful, and you look at them and you look at the data, whether it's an exit velo or launch angle on hitters or whatever. Sometimes we think that there is a 1-to-1 correlation between this and this, and it always gives me pause, because this, like Randy would say, the movement creates the data doesn't create the movement. So I would have him, just a short, quick story about this that I think will help. There was an organization, a college team, that brought me in to look at their pitcher, and they didn't like his spin rate and his angle on his slider. And they brought me in, and we were I think, Randy, you know the story. We were an hour into the conversation. I hadn't said anything, and they had all these experts in there. And finally, the guy says to me, "Ron, you haven't said anything." And I said, "I want to know what the batting average against that pitch is for him currently." And they go, "Oh, we haven't looked at that." And I go, "You need to look at that." And it ended up to be 187. So the league was hitting 187 against that slider. And I said, that would be the data that I would spend more time on. Right. I don't want to improve something that doesn't need to be improved. Right. That would be like, if Raquel Welch doesn't cook well, it's okay with me. Right. We'll get takeout. Right. So it's about. Some of the younger guys are going, "Who's that?"
No one knows who that is, Ron. Like,
that's the first on Baseball Outside the Box, Raquel Welch.
Yeah.
We'll put a picture on. We'll put a picture on the website.
So I would say to him, I want to answer his question really quickly. I would create your own database and compare the kid to the kid and see how his result is working with the hitters and how is that going. And maybe he doesn't need to change it all. And maybe he does, and you don't. So the next question is, how do you improve spin rate? And so then that's a whole nother question. What is constraining him from having this ball exit his hand as efficiently? And so it's more detailed than that. So I'm always cautious about trying to judge somebody just based on a spin rate, right?
I agree.
You're a Cub fan, Pete, right?
Yes.
Well, Farnsworth threw a ball harder than anybody, and he couldn't get anybody out, right?
Right. That's when you need to change something, right?
Yeah. So, Randy,
don't be deceived by spin rate either. It's not always rate. You don't have to. Look, what we find in our lab is that if you have a high school, college guy, mostly college and pro, if they got about 2,000 RPMs and they're moving well, the ball is going to carry. It's really not about the spin rate. It's what's the ball doing? Right? Is it carrying? Is it sinking? Is it running? And I think in a high school environment, the Rapsodo can be very helpful in identifying what kind of pitcher is this guy going to be. Is he going to be a guy who's going to attack guys up in the strike zone because he gets a lot of induced vertical break, the ball carries, it hops? Or is he going to be a sinker slider guy that has to work left to right?
Yeah.
And because you have limited time, I think the most important thing a high school guy would be able to use it for is look at the induced vertical and horizontal breaks, and then start there going, okay, my guy's going to have more success attacking guys up in the zone or down in the zone.
Right.
Pretty
right.
simple like that.
And even with spin efficiency, that's a complicated thing because your slider is going to be less efficient.
Right.
You know.
And guys, we can't forget the difference in velocity too, can we?
Well, that's the thing Ron alluded to. We don't have normative data on high school guys. So we got a guy who spins it or carries it 20 inches and it's 80 miles an hour. Is that good or bad? We don't know. There's not a nationwide database to know.
If he's getting out,
you think it'll
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See the other thing is this, and I think Randy and I actually haven't ever talked about this, but what people miss on this, and I actually talked to Kyle Bodie about this when I was out in Arizona, is that the hitters adjust and adapt, of course, over time to what they're seeing. So right now we're in a high spin rate era. Well, there's going to be more and more guys now going to be able to hit high spin rate because they're going to have to, right? Either strike out or right, and they're going to make that adjustment. And then pretty soon, remember when we were growing up, guys, we're about all the same age, or I know I'm a little older, but Maddox and Glavin were this way, right? Now we're living in this way, right? Yeah. The game shifts back and forth, and that is important. It's good, but you always got to keep it in context, and that's the challenge for that.
You know, it's interesting. I remember Jim Lefebvre saying, you know, in the hitting aspect, he said, you know, everybody's throwing so much harder now. We've got to work on catching up to those guys. Randy, go ahead. You were saying,
yeah, I had a similar conversation with Kyle too, and he did point this out: the evolution from sinker to carry guy. Like guys, basically all the guys that can hit low pitches evolved and ascended because survival of the fittest. Everybody's throwing the ball down in the zone. The low ball hitters succeed. Now you throw it up in the zone. They can't get to the high pitch. The only guys that succeed now are the guys that get to the fastball that's carrying. Right? It's going to evolve back the other way, and sinkers are going to come back in. And Kyle pointed this out. He said, it's going to happen quicker now because we have the objective data. It's not going to take 2 decades. It's going to take 5 years because we have information now that'll help accelerate it. So it's a really good point. Really good point.
I'm going to take one more question, and then what I'm going to do at the end, just ask you one thing to kind of finalize it all. But one of the questions came up about forearm soreness. You know, are there exercises for forearm soreness? And also, is it important for the strength aspect to strengthen it?
I'm going to turn it over to a physical therapist because, hey, Randy, it hurts right here. Do you have a stretch for that?
You know, I love that. Don't you have some stretches I can do? Yeah, I'll give you some stretch. Okay. And whoever that guy is, it's really cheap. You can go to my website and buy Start With the Pain. It has a whole formula for that. But it's never one thing. It's always a bunch of things. Okay. It's never, that did it. It's a combination there. There's never, it's not this thing caused an injury. It was that this set of variables produced an environment where it was ripe for injury to occur. It was, and so you have to then have a process for looking at the variables, and it's the same things that we talked about for a recovery. And you have to examine each one and go, okay, these are possible contributors. Let's eliminate them, and then let's see if the pain goes away. So forearm soreness, multiple possible contributors: physical, biomechanical, preparatory, strength and conditioning. And I think that the world has been fed this false assumption that strength is the answer. Make your forearm strong. I don't think it has anything to do with strength. I think it has to do with coordination, timing, sequencing, synergy. Can you turn that muscle on at the right moment? Okay. If it was just strength, I wish it was. Wouldn't it be easy, Ron? If it was just about strength, we could just all go in the gym and you'd throw the ball 1,000 because you'd be the strongest guy in the room.
And Trevor Bauer would have thrown it 23 miles an hour.
Exactly. Look, there is a level of strength you have to have, but the strength eventually has to be the kind of strength that helps you throw a baseball. That's what savage training is all about: specific adaptation. And if he wants to learn more about that, any coaches want to know, I'm having this online certification course in savage training on May 8th and 9th, and they can sign up for it at floridabaseballranch.com/remote. Shameless plug there. Sorry, shameless plug. But it's going to be live.
And it feeds in perfectly because I did want you guys to address. You got Savage Satellite Training Program. I noticed that like you said, the certification. Ron has his bestseller, the bestseller on Amazon, the Arms Race book. Both you, start with Randy. You mentioned the satellite program. Anything else you're doing now that can help coaches online?
Well, what we're doing on May 8th and 9th, we're doing a live stream event. It's a 2-day coaching seminar, and it's basically teaching you how to use movement science and coordinated strengthening to create the specific adaptations that we're looking for. It's it'll talk about how do we integrate the exercises, the gym, the workout to make our athlete move differently. And the theme is train movement, not mechanics. We want to teach the athlete to move better so that the ball comes out differently, okay? And we're trying to teach you how to use an integrated approach and not just throwing drills, but strengthening conditioning exercises in the gym. How do you take that with your mobility exercises and integrate them all to create a hyper-personalized program that allows the movement to change so that the data can change? And so that's going to be on May 8th and 9th. They can register for it at floridabaseballranch.com/coach, floridabaseballranch.com/coach. And they can learn all about it there, or call us at 866-STRIKE-3. And
fantastic. Ron, what do you got going for the coaches out there? They help them out.
Well, first of all, the DuraThrow, we have a DuraThrow program that is coach centric, and so you can just call the office at 936-588-6762 and ask for the DuraThrow, and that is access to all of our drills, all the things all the teaching things we do, all the mindset, all the newsletter and DVDs, and then Coach Flint Wallace, our director of player development, does a biweekly vlog on that. And I would and Pete, what I'm doing for everybody, we've opened this up since COVID. We're giving away for parents and coaches the Pitching with Confidence book. It's all they have to do is go freepitchingbook.com and freepitchingbook.com, and all they have to do is pay shipping, and we'll give them the book. And it has every chapter has a theme to it, like what about weighted balls? What about conditioning? What about long toss? What about high school baseball? What about being drafted? What about? And so every chapter is one of those things, and they can just have that. All they got to do is go to freepitchingbook.com, and we'll send that to them.
And another thing I love about these guys, they are very generous with their knowledge. Guys, last thing, promise, this is how we're going to close the show. Tell us, Randy, either something that in the last few years you've kind of invented or produced to help coaches, or something you're about to do that maybe a year from now or even less than that time, there's going to be something new out there to help coaches.
Well, for me, the biggest evolution was this idea of savage training, specific adaptation through variability and goal-directed experiences. It started out as a strengthening book. And what we realized is that if you want to change the pitcher, you got to change the way he moves. And it became a whole sort of universal approach to helping pitchers become better athletes. And Ron had been talking about that since the athletic pitcher, right? And it really defines what do we mean by athleticism, and how do we create it? How do we teach it? How do we produce it in our athletes, and how do we develop it? And that's where the motor learning science comes in. And I'm really proud of it. Our staff has worked really hard to kind of assimilate all these ideas, and they've been evolving over time for a long, long time. And it has really helped a lot of our players increase the rate of return on their training. And then the biggest thing we have coming up in the near future is that certification course on savage training, how to take these ideas and implement them. And that's May 8th and 9th. And then, we have, hopefully, if this whole thing clears, we'll have our summer training program. Ron and I are both in the same situation with that. We have really robust summer training programs where we work with a lot of players. And I'm confident that we're going to open up enough to be able to do that by then. And B, we're going to be CDC compliant. We're going to keep our distance. We're going to work in smaller groups than we ever have. We're going to work to keep everything, to keep everybody safe and healthy while we train. I think we can find a nice medium. I don't think we have to go extremes either way. I don't think we have to go the way we've always done it. And I also don't think that we have to shut it down completely. I think we can all be responsible and keep keep our hygiene and keep our distance from each other and still train in smaller groups and get a lot of good stuff done.
Ron, quickly also, what's the future of, you think, of training? Is it the brain? Is it something, you're always thinking outside the box. What's out there that we haven't really looked into yet that maybe Ron Wolforth and Randy Sullivan are going to get together and look into?
Well, Randy kind of talked about it, is the motor skill acquisition part, where we throw away the traditional. Okay, let me just rephrase that. We now have moved away from the traditional thought process of actually how someone actually acquires motor skills at the highest level. And for me, on top of it, our the new foundation for us is I'm working. Jill and I are working with a man by the name of Jim Moore, and Simi, who is probably around 8 to 10 major league organizations have the Simi camera systems, between 8 and 16 cameras in their stadiums, and they're able to digitize movement. So a markerless system, so we know exactly what the joint angles, limb angles, rate of acceleration, that sort of thing. And one of those would cost probably between 125 and 250,000. The Yankees, of course, have the biggest one because they're the Yankees. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to make that a 2-camera system, and we're working very hard. And we think that by this January coming up, and then by next summer, we'll be able, and Randy will be beta testing this, a sample of this, and we will be as well, and try to take out some of the kinks of it before we turn it out to the general population. But really, to do a video analysis completely different than we've done before, which is subjective, and now we're going to datify the movement. And so therefore, when we're talking about the forearm angle, it's not just we're going to give it a 4 or a 5 or a 6. We're actually going to give it a degree, and that way. So if Randy's son Ty was throwing, and I did his video analysis in September, and then I did it again 6 weeks later, I can actually compare. It can really, it's comparative, and we can really see how he's doing rather than just guessing. And so that, to me, that's the future, is that we're going to take this technology into the video capture business.
Awesome. Randy, it looked like you wanted to jump in there. You were leading off. It looked like you were leading off, ready to go.
Oh, no. I was just on bated breath listening to what he was saying, because I can't wait to get my hands on it and test it. It's really exciting. Ron's been working on that a long time, and I'm really eager to see the fruits of that labor and sharing it.
And Pete, one more thing. Not only are Randy and I and the company creating this, but even more importantly, we're not just going to say, okay, well, your forearm is at 49 degrees. Good luck to you. We are going to create normative things so that when you're in the red area where you're kind of outside, we're going to say to you, hey, make sure now, let's check your recovery. Let's check your pain. And if these things are there, then we probably need to address that. And then we'll give these people a series of drills and correctives that they can do, not only from the physical therapy side and the structure side, but all the way down to the movement pattern side. So I think we're going to be able to help the average mom and dad, the average academy around the country be way better at being able to help people keep healthy and safe, and really develop themselves as being a better mover.
Fantastic. And when you guys say one more thing, but I'm never going to say no. Keep going. I also noticed, folks, on Ron's on Twitter, that he was helping academies and businesses, that were struggling during this time with a seminar. So check both the Twitters out, everything on the show notes. Hey, listen, guys, this has been fantastic. I got to tell you, you don't need the exposure. You're doing this to help me out because you've got, time is, is important to you. And I really, really appreciate the time because this is tremendous. So, guys, again, Randy, thank you for joining us. It's great meeting you. Hopefully meet you in person.
My pleasure. Thank you, Pete. It's great. Thanks a lot. And I can't wait to go on the next international trip to New Zealand, right, Ron? Is that where I'm going next? Is that I get the B. I get the B list.
Timbuktu.
Hey, you got right. Ron's got more power than I do with ISG, so don't worry. Just keep going that way. He's the man.
Pete and I were in Aruba, and we almost didn't come back.
That's right.
I had a great time in Saskatchewan. It's a lovely city. I love it. Okay. It was great.
There's nothing like international baseball, and there's great coaches, great people all over the world that love this game, have a great passion for it.
You bet. It was
Ron, again, thanks to you also, man. I appreciate it, my friend.
It's always good. Always good to see you, Pete.
All right, folks, that is Randy Sullivan, the Florida Baseball Ranch, and I almost forgot, Ron Wolforth, Texas Baseball Ranch. I'm your host, Pete Caliendo, for Baseball Outside the Box. Yes, this is a real podcast. We don't edit anything. It is what you hear is what you hear. I want to thank our producer, Brian Kroc, with the Lineup Media Group. Thank you to all our listeners in the U.S. and around the world. You make our show. Without you, we don't have a show. Really appreciate it. Keep spreading it all over the world. This has been a fantastic show. Remember, the show that loves to interview baseball's best coaching minds who love the challenge of status quo. Stay safe. Stay in your house. Things are going to get better. I promise you, we're all going to be back on the fields pretty soon. God bless you all, and we'll see you on the next show.